Welcome to a Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie tank, part 85. Cleaning up the superstructure, painting the smokebox, relocating the snifting valve and making the blower. This lump of soft solder has been annoying me for a while. It's right at the front of the right hand side tank where I soldered the half round beading back in place. Now it's time to remove this unsightly blob, and to do that I'm using a rotary wire brush as shown here. As I've mentioned before, this shape of wire brush is by far the most convenient. When using it in the Proxxon motor tool I can get right into the corners, and the other good thing is it doesn't shed many bristles. Before painting these side tanks I will be rubbing them down with some emery cloth which will take care of any other blemishes. And now in the outer part of the workshop I've put an upturned plastic tub on top of a piece of wooden board, because I'm going to paint the smokebox and the smokebox door. The paint that I'm using from the rattle can is HMG Satin Black. This is an enamel paint and it's very good quality. It resists the heat well and it dries to a very matte finish. On the satin black spectrum it's definitely more matte than gloss. In this clip you're seeing me paint something that is not on a horizontal plane. Where possible, I will always paint something laid flat on a board. But I can't do this with the shape of this smokebox, so I'm applying quite a few very light coats. And the good thing is, once I've got all the way around the first time, I can immediately start the second coat. Eventually I get a very even covering, so I just need to leave this to dry. Before I do that though, I'll give it one more coat, just for look. This HMG Satin Black paint sprays beautifully, and once dry it really does look the part. It was very pleasant in the outer part of the workshop with the door wide open listening to the birds' song, while simultaneously painting the smokebox and the smokebox door. So now here's a shot of them drying. But that's enough of that. It's time to go back into the inner part of the workshop and remove the snifting valve. If you've been following this series you will realise that I fitted the snifting valve through the side of the smokebox, in a place where I shouldn't have fitted it, right in the way of the dummy steam pipes that come up towards the smokebox itself. I've had a much better idea for the snifting valve. I'm relocating it so it can draw in air from underneath the smokebox. I'll need to fit an extension pipe to it and I'll show that shortly. I bent the original piece of pipe and I never expected it to work, but at least to know how to bend the next piece of pipe to get the same angle. More about that later in the episode. I made this video over 2 days, and on day 1 I really shot myself in the foot. I did the painting in the outer part of the workshop first, which meant that I couldn't use the brazing hearth for silver soldering. So I made the roughest version of a steam blower you've ever seen. Just out of curiosity, I wondered if my Proxxon blowtorch would silver solder 5/32 of an inch diameter piping, and it did. Here's the result. Now it's time to remove the original piece of pipe that connects to the snifting valve. It's badly kinked and no good at all for the job. I'm going to make a new piece of pipe to connect the snifting valve to the wet header. By looking at the old pipe, and that's the one that's covered in felt tip pen marks, I can get a good idea how the new one needs to fit. This piece of pipe is not yet correctly bent, but once I've silver soldered the unions on the end of it, the ends will be very soft and I can bend them further. After the silver soldering, the pipe on the left is ready to clean up, but before I do that I'm going to do a test fit. And the best way to make sure it fits is to fasten it at both ends, one end to the snifting valve and the other end to the wet header. Then finally, with the help of a piece of steel bar, I can bend the pipe into the correct position without kinking it. Now the snifting valve points downwards instead of out of the side of the smokebox. The next part of the job involves making a 1/4 inch pipe extension that will go through the bottom of the smokebox. So it's over to my newly acquired Myford lathe, right behind me where I sit at the main workbench, to just machine the end of a taper cone. I'm doing this because the end of the snifting valve has a flat face. Here's the modified cone, which fits perfectly onto the end of a piece of 1/4 inch diameter pipe. And after silver soldering, the extension pipe looks like this. I think it will be better than the original idea. I noticed that in the early stages of steaming the engine on the bench, quite a lot of water ran out of the snifting valve onto the running boards. But now this won't happen, as any water coming out of the snifting valve will just run down the extension pipe onto the ground. Here you can see very clearly the general arrangement. Now it's time to make a proper blower. I made this one badly on purpose just to illustrate one or two do's and don'ts. This is the new one that I'm making, and the first thing to do is to take a piece of 5/32 of an inch copper pipe and anneal it, heat it to fairly bright red and then quench it in water. This makes the copper pipe very soft, and it's really easy to bend it into more or less any shape you want. And the copper pipe bends very easily and doesn't kink at all. I bend it to the shape that I require around a piece of brass. Just a bit of scrap that I found in my scrap brass box. After turning it into this shape, I use the bandsaw to cut it at an angle. Now I need to persuade the cut piece to touch the main piece of the copper. And for this I'm using a hammer, but not just any hammer. This is a rubber hammer. It's very important. If you use anything harder than rubber, you will flatten the edge of the piece of copper pipe, especially as it's still very soft after the annealing process. After silver soldering, it looked like this. I'm using a small drum sander in the Proxxon motor tool just to clean up the soldered part. The main cleanup will take place as usual in the acid bath. Back now to the one I made previously very badly. You will notice that the pipe is squashed where the holes are. I'll show you how this happened. For marking the hole positions on the pipe, do not use a centre punch. The copper is far too soft and the centre punch will crush it. In this clip I'm going to show what happens when you use the wrong tool to beat the piece of copper into submission. The only good thing about this clip was that my Proxxon blowtorch silver soldered joint still remained intact after all that abuse. Here's the new one. I just need to drill the holes in it, which is nothing of a job. For now though, I'm going to temporarily fit the blower in position. And what I'm doing here is checking that I can get access to every tube with a flue brush. Sometimes parts can get in the way of this operation and you end up with one flue tube that is always inaccessible for cleaning. And while on the subject of cleaning, it's time to look in my acid bath. I've been using the acid bath to clean these electrodes from my electroplating bath, and now they're really clean, ready for the next job. I originally used them to copper plate the chimney cap, and here it is looking quite nice. The final part of the episode is just to drop the piping into the acid bath, shut the lid and leave it for 24 hours. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.